What's up, guys? TowerNumberNine here, and today we're going to take a look at the third sister, a new leader that FFG previewed today for Star Wars Unlimited TCG. Let's get into it. So, third sister, Seething with Ambition. She is an aggression villainy leader. She has the Force, Imperial, and Inquisitor traits. As an action, you can exhaust to play a unit from your hand. It gains Hidden for the phase. It can't be attacked for this phase unless it has Sentinel. She on 5 or more resources deploys as a 5/4. She has Hidden herself, so she can't be attacked if she was deployed this phase. And on attack, the next unit you play this phase gains Hidden. So very focused on this new Hidden keyword. She has the kind of infamous 5/4 stat line that IG88 had earlier on, but I think she's going to be able to do better, a better job with it overall than he has. Let's get into some more detail here. So Hidden is this new keyword. It protects units when they're first played by preventing the enemy from attacking them with their own units. And it's worth noting that this applies not only to any units that your opponent already has on the board, but also to any other units that they could potentially bring in, either with things that come into play ready, ambushes, things like that. Those still can't attack hidden units. So it's just a strong way to prevent the opponent from using any form of unit combat to deal with something that you played. And there is an exception if the unit has Sentinel, but otherwise you're safe. And this generally is pretty powerful in my opinion because unit combat is a fairly standard way to deal with opposing units, especially against decks that have a lot of ambushes. Hidden is going to allow you to hopefully keep your unit alive longer. In some ways, it can be considered similar to Sabine Wren, You Can Count on Me from the Twilight of the Republic set. She has an ability while she is exhausted, she can't be attacked, which is similar to Hidden in that when you first play her, she is exhausted. And then in subsequent turns, if she attacks, she becomes exhausted again and can benefit from it more times. This can be a very strong effect with her to protect her from potential opposing units. And with the third sister, you're going to be able to use a similar effect, at least for the turn that you play them, on a bunch of your stuff. Now, it is worth noting, Hidden does not protect you from being targeted by card effects. So if the opponent, if you play a Hidden unit and the opponent just plays open fire on it, they can still do that, even while Hidden still counts. That's not an attack, but it does work against ambush. So a lot of the direct removal is still going to work against hidden cards, but ambush will not. Um, I think one of the ways that Hidden is going to be potentially quite relevant is that there are a lot of units in the game right now that suffer from not having any immediate board impact. In general, anything above like 3, arguably 4 cost has to either have immediate board impact or be extremely strong. So when I say immediate board impact, what I mean there is a unit has to have either like some kind of when played effect that immediately does something relevant. Maybe it has Sentinel, so your opponent has to potentially crash units into it. Maybe it has Ambush, so you can swing as soon as you play it. But units that don't immediately affect the board are often bad. There are some exceptions, like units with really good stats for cost or really good abilities can potentially get around this. So Poe Dameron is one example of something that I think can get around this. We do see Poe being played in some decks, even when they can't ambush him out. Like, we've seen some Quinlan decks play Poe, for instance. But even then, these units are much more commonly played in decks that have ambush, like Sabine ECL. So the Hidden keyword offers a new way to potentially mitigate the downside of being a unit with no immediate board impact. One of the problems with those cards is that sometimes your opponent just kills it. So like this Wedge Antilles, Star of the Rebellion, 5 for a 5/5 is like an okay, not amazing, but not horrible stat line. But his ability is actually quite good. Each friendly vehicle unit gets +1/+1 and gains ambush. That can potentially be extremely strong, but the problem is you have to play him, then you probably don't have resources to immediately play a vehicle. So he has to survive to the next turn for you to take advantage of that ability. And your opponent can just swing into him and clear him out before you get a chance to get a big benefit a lot of the time. Now, maybe you already have a bunch of vehicles, so the +1/+1 is still relevant, but the odds of pulling off that big ambush play are not so great. Now, if you had a way to play Wedge with Hidden, that might be very different because now you can play him, your opponent can't attack into him, and you can potentially then bring out one of those vehicles with ambush next turn. Again, still vulnerable to removal, but protects from those initial attacks and does seem to me to be a way to potentially get more value out of these sorts of units. Now, are you going to play Wedge in a third sister deck? Probably not. He's heroism, but that's an example of something where Hidden might allow you to get a lot more value out of a unit than you would otherwise be able to under normal circumstances. So The leader side lets you mitigate those weaknesses by giving unit hidden to any unit played from hand for free, which is potentially a huge boost. Like if we look at Fennec Shand, who gives out ambush, that's very strong, but she's very restricted. Not only do you have to pay an extra resource to use that ability, but it additionally only applies to units that are below a certain cost. Whereas this is just any unit and it's free. One thing that I think is both like thematically fitting and also potentially quite effective is that a lot of the actual Inquisitor trait units can really benefit from this because they tend to have powerful abilities that require them to attack to go off. And one other note is that I think that if you put Energy Conversion Lab in a deck, you could potentially mitigate the no immediate board impact issue both by playing units with hidden and you have that crucial ambush to use at the right moment as well. But you can't use both abilities at once, at least while she's on her leader side here. So let's take a look at some of those Inquisitor units. Fifth Brother, Fear Hunter, Scythe, Intimidating Silhouette, Seventh Sister, Implacable Inquisitor. All of these have on-attack abilities that are quite good, or abilities that require an attack in Seventh Sister's case. But there's kind of an issue with them, which is, are they going to survive to make that attack? Well, if you're playing Third Sister as your leader, all of a sudden you have a more reliable way to get these Inquisitors to survive because you can potentially play them and give them hidden and your opponents can't attack into them, and now you have a much better chance of getting value out of those abilities. So that's both like thematically fitting in some ways and also seems like it could be a relevant gameplay synergy. Also, Scythe here has an ability that synergizes with the Inquisitor trait. All of these units have the Inquisitor trait, and if we see more Inquisitors and more Inquisitor trait synergy, that could be another area in which Third Sister could do very well. So let's talk about the leader side now. 5-4 is kind of infamous. It's the IG-88 stat line. So IG-88 was a very unsuccessful leader from the Spark of Rebellion set. I thought actually he was going to be really good. I remember when they previewed him. I believe I was in the Czech Republic at that time, and I remember thinking, oh man, this card's going to be sick. 5-4. You can hit the opponent so hard, and it just turned out to be way more vulnerable than I was thinking. Like removal events, even just like normal unit combat, there were too many ways to clear him. Even if you might play him and the opponent ambushes him, you might play him and the opponent plays like a fleet lieutenant and boosts a basic unit to trade with him. There were just a lot of things that could go wrong with IG-88, and he unfortunately really didn't make a huge splash on the competitive scene. Third Sister has those same stats, and while you might be worried, she does have hidden, which protects against a bunch of the things that IG-88 is worried about. So are you going to get ambushed when you play her? No. Are you going, or as soon as you deploy at least? No, you're not going to because she can't be attacked. Is that fleet lieutenant play going to kill Third Sister? No, because again, she has hidden to protect. Now, can the opponent still play an open fire, a takedown, something like that? Yes, hidden does not protect against those events. It's not perfect protection, but I think it goes a long way towards making this stat line more effective. So and I also think that assuming the hidden keyword is good, worst case scenario, she might end up being similar to Fennec Shand, where her leader side is maybe not the greatest and can be dealt with more easily than some, but her leader unit side. But her leader ability provides a keyword that can be potentially quite relevant and does it, in this case for free, which can maybe make up for that potential vulnerability. So it'll need more testing overall, but I'm actually a lot more I'm a lot more interested in a 4 HP leader when it comes with this protective keyword and can give it to other units so easily. Another thing to note is that Third Sister is going to enable force synergies. So this gets kind of to a broader topic, which is villainy decks in general have been less able to run force synergy, not because there aren't good villain force cards. There are good villain force cards, but because villain doesn't have very many good early force units that you would want to be playing in the first place in order to enable those force synergies. Now we are going to have not only a bunch more force units, this is Legends of the Force and it's a force themed set, but we're also going to have this hidden keyword that is going to allow us to better protect the force units that we play. I think this could make cards like Force Throw, which is a neutral card but currently more or less only seen in heroism decks, and Force Lightning, which I actually think is a very good card but has lacked the support in the form of early force units that it needs to really make a splash. This can change. And I think Third Sister is very well positioned to potentially make villain force or power or the dark side deck or whatever a scary new archetype. So Here are some examples of some strong cards that you might want to run. So Forced Throw, really, really good. Like I said earlier, not a villain card, but because villain doesn't have good early force units, it's normally only run in heroism decks. Fallen Lightsaber, 3 for a +3/+3 upgrade is solid, and then it also gives this really good mass ping ability if the attached unit is a force unit, which is just, it can potentially be extremely strong depending on what your opponent's running. And then Palpatine's Return does see some play, but in a kind of ironic twist, it's mostly used to bring back big capital ships, whereas in this case, you could potentially be using it to bring back force units instead, and potentially discount them by 8 instead of just by 6. So I think there are some pretty good villain force synergy cards out there. They've been lacking the units they need to support it, and I think Third Sister is not only going to be one of those units herself in terms of relatively early deploying force leader, but she is also going to allow you to give that hidden keyword and protect the other units to buy you time to set up these synergies. So where do I think she's going to land as a whole? It's really hard to say without more information and testing overall. But I'm actually pretty optimistic about Third Sister. I think that if you get the right support, she could be a powerful deck. One question that I have is whether others are going to do the villain force archetype better. Right now, the main competition there would be Kylo Ren from the Shadows of the Galaxy set. He hasn't really been great. He can be really fast, but he tends to run out of cards in hand, which can really limit the extent to which he can keep the aggression going. And it's harder for him to recover if the opponent stabilizes compared to something like Sabine Wren, which has more sort of tricky plays that you can do to sneak some damage through. He also definitely stands to gain from more force synergies and so on in the new set. Could be interesting to see what ends up happening, but as it stands, I think Third Sister is a really interesting option for a potential villain force deck, for potentially getting more value out of some of these units that don't have that much immediate impact, but when protected with hidden could end up being strong. So I'm pretty optimistic about her, but we'll have to see exactly where things land. And it is also going to depend on what other options exist in terms of cards that would be threats to her in terms of both things that can kill her, but also in terms of like other leaders that might use those synergies better. There are going to be a lot of force leaders, so it's possible there will be something else that works better. One other thing that I think is really cool with her is that late in the game, you can potentially use her hidden ability to play a powerful unit. The opponent can't attack it, and they have to either remove it quickly or might just have to take the initiative to try to fight you. This seems like a good way to sort of put the opponent in check. Let's say your opponent's low on HP and you use her ability to play like, I don't know, an ATST or like Pilot Vader as a unit or whatever with hidden. They can't just crash units into it, even if they have a better board. They might end up having to take the initiative. Could be an interesting way to get one over on the opponent. So that's something to consider. And the next question I think is, what does she need to really shine? Like, what cards am I looking for in future previews that seem like the cards that a Third Sister will need? So first off, kind of somewhat obviously, units that really benefit from hidden to protect them. So often that would be something that's like really good but doesn't have an immediate board impact, and is at risk of just being taken out by opposing units. I think that strong early game force units, especially 3 or less cost, would be really important for setting up those force synergies. If we see more villainy discard options, that would help open up some space for sure. So as an example, right now, Force Throw and Pillage are probably 2 of the best discard cards in the game, but a Heroism force deck has a lot of other discard cards that it can include to really attack the hand. So Quinlan can play 4-cost Ahsoka, who caused the opponent to discard Spark of Rebellion, K2SO. There are a lot of other cards that can force discards, and I think that having some of those for villainy would help that as a potential strategy, especially against control. More Inquisitor trait synergies and more Inquisitors, especially early game ones, wouldn't hurt at all. And one other thing is that I think ways to get or keep the initiative would really help. So when I'm talking about that, one example would be cards like Fleet Lieutenant, where not only do you play a unit, but you also get to attack with another unit. So you're sort of taking 2 actions in one. That sort of action compression thing can be really good for keeping or taking the initiative. And I think that can be really relevant for Third Sister, because if you play a hidden unit and you end up with the initiative at the end of the turn, you have the ability to attack with that unit before the opponent can attack it. But if your opponent takes the initiative, they can potentially try to counter you by attacking the hidden unit before it gets a chance to go at the start of the next turn. So if she has some cards that will allow her to gain the advantage when it comes to initiative, I think that's one thing that could also be a way to make hidden more powerful. Okay, So that's my overview of Third Sister. I wanted to do a kind of more in-depth video discussing leaders. I'm still doing the short preview card reviews on YouTube Shorts for most preview cards, but I think leaders maybe merit a more in-depth look. So I'm going to be producing some more of these as we see more leaders previewed for this set. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you think this format is good. Let me know if you think this format is bad. If you liked the video, feel free to drop a like. If you disliked the video, feel free to drop a dislike. I know it sounds weird for a YouTuber to be asking people to dislike their video if they didn't like it, but I genuinely look at the like dislike ratios and see how things are doing on that front. Yeah, that's gonna do it for this one, guys. Thanks to y'all for watching, and we'll be back later with some more Star Wars Unlimited content. I will catch you guys later.